Hello, everyone, and welcome to Burn the Ship, the podcast that helps entrepreneurs go all in on their business, and we introduce them to professionals that can help them to do so. Today, we have a very special guest, Mr. Gregg London. How you doing today, Greg?
I'm doing fine. How about you?
I'm doing very well, thanks. We definitely appreciate you coming on today, and we want to learn more about your
Sure.
consulting business, and we understand that time is one of our most valuable resources. So tell us a little bit about your journey, Greg.
I did way back, and I'll date myself, way back in the early 80s, 1980s, I wanted a career in IT. I did what everybody else did, and that was I went to work for IBM.
Mm-hmm.
I became a systems engineer for the 5110 and 20. The older people in your audience will know what I just said, as well as the System 23 Data Master.
Mm-hmm.
You work for IBM not so much because of the experience, but you work there so you can say you work there when you decide to go off onto other jobs. A couple of years after that, I became a software support organization for them and started my own manufacturing and distribution practice where I was implementing very large scale MRP, MRP2, and ERP systems. I still have some of my clients. Pagani Automotive is a client. Western Commerce, they're the largest honey producer, is a client. Western Industries built probably about 30 to 40% of the space shuttle. They're still a client. But in
Nice.
1993, one of my clients needed a barcode. And this is prior to the internet, prior to 1-800, where can I find a UPC? And so it took 3 months, top to bottom, to find at that time the Uniform Code Council, complete a 25-page application, and literally get back the company prefix and then create the numbers that comprise the UPC and the check digit. There were no formulas, no Excel tricks to do that, and camera ready artwork. It took 3 months, and I thought
Mm-hmm.
this was the height of stupidity. How do people do this? How do the major companies like Coke and Pepsi and ConAgra? Well, I streamlined a process, and then when the internet started in 1996, I put up a small web page and said, "Hey, for 25 bucks and your UCC membership fee, I'll create 5 camera-ready barcodes for you. And if you need more, just send me the information. If it's like 5 or 10 at a shot, then send me a few bucks." By 1999, I had created more than 500,000 UPCs for companies large and small. I still have a number
Awesome.
of those initial clients: Eastman Kodak, Litton, Fujitsu, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But it was sort of interesting because here I'd created all these UPCs and wasn't really sure what value, if anything, they were worth. I mean, obviously, I was doing a service for clients, but late 1999, I got a call from a company called Click the Button. They were the first comparison shopping site. Amazon, if you remember, existed, but they were
Mm-hmm.
simply the largest bookstore on the planet.
That's
They
right.
weren't into mass like they are now. Uh, anyway, Click the Button had built 50,000 records in audio, video games, and books. And they were wondering if this massive database that sort of I created, we could trade. I said, sure. Well, they went out of business, but they were nice enough on the way out to uh, send me their data. And then, if you remember, in early 2000, 2000, late 2000, early 2001, Safeway, the very popular West Coast grocery chain, decided to try and compete with Amazon's fledgling Peapod. So they created Webvan. It was the first attempt at a nationwide online grocery delivery service. Failed
Mm-hmm.
miserably, took $1 billion of Safeway's money with it.
Ooh.
But all of the data that they had built, this 25,000 records in grocery, was housed at EDS. Now, we live in North Texas, and about 10 minutes from at that time, the EDS headquarters, now it's Hewlett Packard. Um, so they gave me the data. They said, we don't want it. So here I have 50,000 records in mass, 25,000 records in grocery. And I put up a small web page and said, hey, for 250 bucks, I'll sell this to you. Had no idea what it was worth.
Right.
The second phone call I got was from the vice president of PepsiCo in North America. And that's when I decided to burn my other business down and
Yes.
go into maintaining UPC data.
Mm-hmm.
It was a slow and arduous task, as you can imagine. I asked all of my friends and family to save their garbage, to save their packages, so I could manually add all of the items to my database. I then got involved with the USDA, the FDA, ARS, ERS, Homeland Security, DEA, TTB, all of these, alphabet soup agencies for data,
Mm-hmm.
to the point where now my grocery database, which is food, health and beauty, general merchandise, snacks and sodas, spirits, etc., is over 850,000 records.
Okay, I see how you've grown it a
Yeah,
lot.
it's
That's
grown a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how you were such an early innovator on things, because when you first started this part of the story, you were talking about let me create 4 or 5 of them for
Yep,
you, and now you got 800,000 plus.
right.
That's awesome.
And now, so I still do work in and around the UPC space. I still help companies secure UPCs, shipping container codes, harmonized tariffs, etc. And we'll get to GS1's 2D barcode a little bit later, but ultimately the database business grew based on, for lack of a better word, just sweat. Uh, Hours and hours of doing data entry, of calling manufacturers, distributors, retailers, telling them what I wanted to do. And I think it goes back to, people in their lives have inspirations. Could be religious inspiration, could be something they've read. I was introduced a long time ago to a book by Chan called Blue Ocean Theory. And in a nutshell, basically, it says try and create a business that is so unique, that is so different from everybody else, that no one is doing, that it's as if you are in the middle of the blue ocean. The advantage is you're in the middle of the blue ocean and no one can get you. No one can come near you. The disadvantage of that is when you sink alone. So
Yes,
there's no one there
yes.
to rescue you that you could partner with or say, hey, buy me out or what have you. This business has seen a lot of ups and downs. I think everybody who wants to be an entrepreneur fails. They have wins, they have losses. At the end of the day, hopefully the wins outnumber the losses. I'm no different. I've had instances where I've blown projects, uh, had to apologize, and I think that's a key thing for a lot of entrepreneurs is they, much like politicians, they've lost the art of apology. To
Mm-hmm.
say you're right, I blew it, I'm sorry. What can I do to make it right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's a trait that most don't have. The other thing is being a sole proprietor and working out of the house. Like I said, I'm in my wife's craft room uh, because the lighting is good. The I think one of the things is this lifestyle, this working at home, this unique business is not for the faint of heart. It's also not for one who anybody who tells you that they're an entrepreneur and they have their own business. There is no such thing as 9 to 5. It
That's
doesn't
right.
exist.
Right.
Um, you answer the phone whenever it rings. You answer an email or a text whenever it comes through. If that's at midnight, well, that happens. And if you're an international business like mine, 2 in the morning is not uncommon. I mean, I have clients in Israel and Europe. Well, midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, they're just getting into work. So,
Mm-hmm. Makes
you have to
sense.
go through that. And I think the one thing I get that a lot of people I think miss about specifically what I do is okay, you've created a database, you've done all of this. Who uses it?
Mm-hmm.
Who would buy it? Who would give you money? $250 was years ago. Now I've got clients who pay 25, 50, $100,000. And so what is it that they're expecting? And I think part of what I do is an understanding of what's the value? How long would it take you to do what I did? And try and place a price tag on it. Yeah, I know everybody knows the old real estate line, which is, what's your house worth? Whatever somebody's willing to pay for it. Well, being a sole proprietor and owning it, if I quote a price of 25 grand and they say, hey, I can only afford 20, well, okay, that's fine. I can do that. It's when
Yes.
I say it's 25 grand and you're going to say I can only afford $250 that I'm going to say, well, sorry, I can't help you.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And as you are doing a great job of describing and showing us the framework of what that client looks like,
Mhm.
and I know you're getting them the data. You said some big names. You said PepsiCo. I mean, you said some big companies. Are
Right.
those the companies that you go after,
Yeah.
or is it
It's
small
interesting.
businesses also?
It's interesting. Those who find each other on LinkedIn, you could be inundated with companies that do marketing or sales, or they want to talk about all of, public relations and all of that. This business is unique. When I started this, there were probably about a dozen names. They're all gone. Uh, People in my space, and let me go into, real briefly, I guess, who my, like you said, client, who are my target clients.
Yes.
Um, they fall into three categories. Well, four. The first I would call the supply chain. Basically, people in point of sale or inventory control. You buy, for sake of argument, a small liquor store or a small convenience store, and you are moving off of an electronic cash register, or you're moving out of a shoebox accounting package like QuickBooks, and you want to move to something more legitimate like Microsoft or IBM or whoever. You'll come to me for either a subset of my data or for all of my data or for what have you, because you just don't want to manually have to go in and enter it. The second would be e-commerce, where you don't want a 22 character description that you get on your receipt. You want an actual legitimate description of the product. You want the categorization, you want the manufacturer, and you want the brand. Companies that would use it along those lines are companies like Amazon and Google. Third would be health and wellness. Because I maintain in my data for food and beverage the complete FDA nutrition fact panel, ingredients, allergens, warnings, country of origin, endorsements, etc., uh, my data powers probably about 30% of all of the health and wellness applications that are there. And that's probably the higher end use. The fourth area would be emerging technologies. Um, and this is going to sound odd for maybe some people, but micro fulfillment centers, uh, two, three, and four tier e-commerce systems in beverage alcohol, what we used to call spirits, uh, autonomous mobile robots, basically technology systems that rely on the item data in order to accomplish what it is that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And so my database breaks down. It used to be just core grocery. It's kind of split into two areas now: food and beverage, conventional food and non-alcoholic beverage, if you will, and then
Mm-hmm.
beverage alcohol, which is beer, wine, liquor, mixers, and cocktails. Interestingly enough, since the virus in 2020, my sales of beverage alcohol have dominated my business, and my sales of food and beverage have kind of tapered off. Now, partly because the virus turned everyone into alcoholics. And I think that's probably one of the key reasons. And more, there are new and emerging technology systems that are coming out that rely on a massive amount of data. Food and beverage has changed a little bit because rampant inflation has crippled the economies of most people. So they're not interested in healthy eating anymore. They're looking, gee, do I feed my family or do I go to work? And if I feed
Yes.
my family, if I buy healthy, I can only afford to feed two of my four people. Well, if I buy unhealthy, then or garbage or processed foods, I can at least feed a family of four. So the food manufacturers are taking advantage of this, and they are putting stickers or banners or front of package label claims on the packages. So they say gluten free, they'll say low sodium, they'll say high potassium, low fat, whatever it is. The problem is that there's not necessarily a scientific basis or a nutritional basis for saying that. It's just a claim. But the packages are starting to look like race cars entered at Daytona. All the little sponsor things.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
think to a certain extent it's crippling. uh, we've got obesity rising in this country and other things. And I think that's what's unfortunately happened. And there's really not much we can do about that. I mean, so, while I still focus on food and beverage, I'm really more in beverage alcohol. And so I think one of the key things is, and, not to be arrogant, but I am the only provider of beverage alcohol data.
Okay. Okay.
And so
If
that puts me in a truly unique position.
so, as our entrepreneurs that are watching today, when you're thinking about what would be a great client for Greg, it is the actual liquor store.
It could be the liquor store. It could be the distillery, the winery, the brewery, and
Okay.
they will be looking to see how they stack up. For example, if you are a major conglomerate like a Diageo or a Constellation, then you are using my data to see how your products compare to other products of the market. For example, there's a real big trend right now in flavored vodka. Pinnacle kind of owns that marketplace. There's a trend in uh, flavored whiskey. Screwball does very well with peanut butter whiskey. Others are doing hybrids where you've got a whiskey that's aged in a wine barrel and you've got wines aged in whiskey barrels. So that's one area. The liquor stores themselves, the distributors,
Mm-hmm.
uh, probably what would be considered true three-tier commerce, where if you are a everybody knows that you can go up online on Instacart and DoorDash and all of these other ones, and you can buy liquor online, depending on your state and where you are. Uh, but a true three-tier commerce system that's linked to the distributor and linked to the client and then linked to a store would allow a customer to sign in, choose the store he wants to buy from, and then order. That order is then filled by that particular store. And if that particular store is out of stock, an electronic order is created, sent to the distributor, and then sent back up the line so that they could either substitute an item or tell them, hey, your item isn't coming for 2 days or what have you. Distributors can push data out to others, bars, hospitality. I'm working with a company that has a truly unique system for bar inventory. If you watch John Taffer on Bar Rescue, he talks
Mm-hmm.
about several of his systems that sponsor him, but they're not there's a lot of manual input. The one I'm working with now has plates. You set the bottle on it. The the plate knows from an RFID tag what the bottle is, and then literally the minute you pick it up and pour and you set it back down, it knows what the weight was. So you
Okay.
can integrate it instantly, and there's little lights on it. So a bar could say, okay, it's happy hour, and gee, this bottle of whatever it was is sitting on the shelf and it's been sitting there for a while. So we're going to discount this by 25%. So you can literally check movement of all of that. Uh, Analytics firms, the larger firms that are out there like Kantar, Nielsen, Circana, which used to be IRI, they're looking at this kind of data to see, again, to flesh out what they get. So if they get from a store a UPC and a 20 character description, now they have full data on it so they can see, what's the category? What is it? Is it whiskey? Is it a bourbon whiskey? Is it blended bourbon whiskey? Is it bourbon whiskey flavored? Same kinds of things, scotch, all of that. Where's it from? What's the alcohol beverage volume? If it's a wine, what's the region? What's the appellation? So there are a lot of things, a lot of there are a lot of data elements in my database, and so it could go from simple to expansive depending on what you're looking to do. It's interesting that over the years, I don't know that necessarily I can pigeonhole everything that's there, but I've got clients across the board doing any and all manner of crazy applications with the data. Some things that
Yeah.
I thought would never work, but then I didn't think my business would work either. So they're succeeding.
that that makes a lot of sense. It seems like those business owners that are in the spirits, because I like spirits instead of the other way. That's the way I grew up knowing them as spirits. If they're in that industry, you're helping them to be educated with the data and to run their business a little bit more efficiently. Is that safe to
Right,
say?
exactly. And to have true item name. One of the things years ago that I think a lot of liquor stores realized was that a 22 character description does not necessarily help you. So if you've got a bottle, for sake of argument, on the shelf of, let's say it's the Macallan Scotch. Okay. So you might have a 22 character description that says Mac or the Mac, BLND blend, uh, SCTH Scotch, and then whiskey WHSK, whatever it is. And then you've got another one, and that one's priced, for sake of argument, at 20 bucks. And then you've
Hmm.
got another one that's priced at 220 bucks. Well, the reason is because the first one was just simply the Macallan, but the second one was the Macallan double wood, 18-year blended Scotch whiskey aged in port wine barrels, etc. So by having a complete description, now you can, when you're checking out, now okay, I can look at the bottle and I can see what this is so that theft is reduced. In other
Yes.
words, now you're
Yes.
not having to rely on um, you're not having to rely on what your point of sale system says. Also, when you order, you can order more efficiently as opposed to going to a distributor and saying, I want Macallan, and they say, which one? There's
Yeah.
only 2 dozen of them. So
Yeah.
you've got a lot of that. Uh, Also, I think one of the things too is for years, the UPC really was just an identifier for point of sale systems.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's morphing. That's changing now to where a lot of the retailers are being asked, forced to use something called verified by GS1, which actually makes sure that the prefix you've got is owned by you and not from a company like Buy a Barcode that claims to be selling legitimate barcodes and they are not.
Okay.
Okay. Uh, and now coming in 2027, you have a Sunrise 2027 with a 2D barcode replacement for a 1D UPC or EAN. That is
Mm-hmm.
going to dynamically change the retail industry in general. So now when you pick up a bottle and you are staring at it and you're looking at it, you see the UPC for for checkout. If you want to know more about it, then with your iPhone or what have you, you've got to look up the product, say, gee, what is it? Well, now you can scan a 2D barcode and you can get links to videos, you can get food pairings, you can get history of the bottle, history of the distiller, history of the winemaker, et cetera, and you can get tasting notes, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, pretty much sky's the limit.
Yeah.
So in order to pull that off, GS1 is creating a custom 2D barcode, and that will link underneath to something called digital link, which is the web page. And so, to me, I'm a partner with GS1 and I'm uniquely suited to go through this. And even though it's coming in 2027, it doesn't mean that every manufacturer is going to be there. But the major players, like you said, the Coke, Pepsi, Conagra, Diageo, Constellation, Gallo, Behringer, etc., are all moving that way. So you're going to
Yeah,
start seeing more and
they're
more
on
2D
board.
codes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they're on board. So what'll happen is
Yeah,
once those larger players go forward, then it'll just start trickling down through
exactly.
where everyone does
Yeah,
it.
and it's why not let the big boys make the mistakes first, figure out what they
Yeah.
did wrong, and then you do it right. And so I think that's one of the things that's there. I think one of the funniest things that I kind of share people is when they say, "How did you get?" You know, yes, I was a high tech dumpster diver and I collected garbage, but how did you end up with beer, wine, and liquor? I mean, which really was a relatively small amount of sales when I started this thing in 2000. Well, my wife's grandparents' last name is Behringer.
Okay.
My brother owns a winery in Fairplay, which is outside Sacramento. A couple of buddies of mine and I at the cigar shop, one of the cigar shops I frequent, we own a distiller, a mash distillery in Scotland. We
Okay.
sell to some of the big boys, and it just because of family connections, because of just I guess an industry knowledge and expertise, and having outlasted everyone else. Um, it's interesting. I'm relied on by the TTB for assistance in certain areas for packaging. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Now we have initiatives around the world, EU wine label compliance, discus distilled spirits. So pretty much having the data and having the client list and having the expertise has kind of, you know, moved my business forward, not necessarily in a way that I thought it would, but it just sort of, I think that's one of the things too, is you have to, as an entrepreneur, if you are in a particular area, you have to adapt.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to say, gee, well, maybe I don't think much of it, but others do. So maybe I need to get on board and maybe I need to ride that wave.
Yeah.
Um, and I
As
think that,
as you're as you're sharing that, as you're going to that particular point, I always ask our guests to talk about some of those skills. It sounds like you're about to do it now, so I just want
yeah,
to get it
something,
going where you can share it.
I think one of the key problems, and this is universal, I think, in entrepreneurs, uh, in and around technology, is if you i- if you don't fully understand your business or who your clients are from a particular level of what they do, then I think you're destined to fail. For example, micro fulfillment centers, which are basically massive systems for online grocery, are for the most part dominated by people who understand robotics and people who understand engineering. But not one of them ever worked in a grocery store.
Hmm.
Uh, I have a massive database of food and beverage alcohol. But years ago, I did work in retail. Not much, but I did work in retail. And so I knew, and from my manufacturing days, I learned the value of accurate data. If your data is not good, if it's not complete, your systems are going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
The UPC, interestingly enough, GS1, which issues the company prefix, which is the first typically 6 digits, uh, really, uh, they're the keeper of the key. But when you talk to them and you look on their website, it's not in English, it's written in GS1 speak. It's very difficult. If you're a small manufacturer and you're making, for sake of argument, I live in North Texas, I live in Frisco. I can drive 20, 30, 40 miles north and I can see people on the side of the road selling beef Holland, barbecue sauce, salsa. If those people are looking for UPCs, they're going to go on the GS1 site and they're going to collapse. They're just going to give up, say this is ridiculous. So I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to think over the years that I've developed an such an expertise, again, not to sound arrogant, but literally GS1 will, if they get people who really don't understand it, or if they want to talk to someone who speaks English, they're going to um, they're going to refer them to me. And if they've
Okay.
got fires, they're going to give them to me, to the point now when I occasionally will do seminars for what's a UPC, what's a global trade item number, what's a shipping container code, to help companies go through that. As far as data, I am not a nutritionist, okay? But having maintained the data and worked with the FDA and the USDA and their subsidiaries, ARS and ERS, and WIC, and which is Women, Infants, and Children, and that program, and SNAP, which is what we used to call food stamps. I'd like to think I've developed enough of an expertise to where I understand the fact panel not only for what it is, but for how it can be used. And to me, looking at the data, it's like Neo looking at the Matrix. It may not make
Yes.
sense to
Yes.
everyone, but I can look at a product instantly and know whether or not I should consume it, whether or not my wife and I should, or our kids, or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I pay
Mm-hmm.
very close attention to food recalls, what's going on, and those kinds of things. So I've developed a level of it, a level of expertise in it, but I don't bill myself as a nutritionist, but it's funny when I deal with nutritionists, I tend to know more about the fact panel than they do, because I think a
Yeah.
lot of them are locked into, okay, well, it's supposed to be this, it's supposed to be that, and that's it. And I also think to a certain extent that grocery stores are failing, um, people uh, eating. They say you can shop by diet, but it's all very canned. It's very simplistic. It's not, if I've got Crohn's disease, for sake of, well, okay, let me back up. More than 100 million people in this country are afflicted with food allergies, chronic food conditions, and food related diseases. We're not addressing it. At any one point
Mm-hmm.
in time, 15 million people, probably more now, are susceptible to anaphylactic shock. And I think largely because they don't know how to read the fact panel, they don't know how to read the package, and the apps that are there, or the grocery store that in theory you want to rely on, doesn't have that information.
Yeah.
So, mm, hopefully the new 2D barcode will spur that on. Um, but again, for right now, it's, we're in a questionable economy now. I mean, obviously, upper class, upper middle class. Okay, fine. Price of grocery went up. Price of everything went up. We can manage it,
Yeah.
but
Right.
it's the food deserts. It's the lower class. They're in trouble, and they spend a
With
lot of money on alcohol. Go figure. So
Yes, of course. I definitely saw that. I think they were deemed an essential business during that time because they were
yeah,
always open. I never saw them close. But just while we're on this point, I know you're not a nutritionist, but you've been in it.
right.
You know. Is it safe to say that it's still cool just to shop on the outside of the
Oh
grocery
yeah,
store?
definitely,
That's still a
definitely.
thing?
I think one of the things you're starting to see is and this gets more into, again, how do where do I end up? I'm a data provider, but the number of people who are looking at point of sale systems, looking at e-commerce systems, looking at all of this, that will call me and say, "Gee, Greg, which point of sale system would you recommend? Which e-commerce system would you recommend?" Not necessarily because I sell them and I don't, but because I've been around them for 25 years, and I know how my data gets imported into each one, so I can say, well, my data works in this one, it doesn't work in that one, or what have you. So, and the one thing I don't do, by the way, is I
Mm-hmm.
am not on. I don't have a referral program. I know there's any number of people who would, point of sale vendors, et cetera, who would like to, you know, pay me a referral fee, pay me something like that, and I routinely turn it down. I don't sign that. If I think you've got a good system, then I'll send the client to you. If they buy, they buy. If they don't, they don't. But
Mm-hmm.
it keeps me independent. And I
Yes.
think that's the
Yes.
key.
Yes.
I'm looking for objectivity. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you talk about, odd stuff, and you're talking about grocery for sake of argument, I think what's dominating the airwaves right now is Kroger and Albertsons, the proposed merger. Number
Mm-hmm.
two, Kroger buying number four, Albertsons. Um, I've already testified before the FTC. I think it's a bad idea. I think it
Okay.
will raise prices. I think it will cripple competition. And I think it will result in higher labor prices across the board. Also, I have an issue with number two buying number four. If it was number two buying number 12, okay, fine.
Right.
But now we're seeing Alimentation Couche-Tard, which is a global powerhouse in convenience stores. They're wanting to buy 7-Eleven. Um, I question that, but
Okay.
it's the way in which it works in business now, and acquisitions, especially in this economy, seem to be favorable. People just don't want to deal with what's going on, or what have you. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the market about who's going to win the next election and what's going to happen in regulations and all of that.
Yeah.
I do my best to stay abreast of it simply because I have to. I want to know
Yes. What you
I
do.
want to know where things are going.
Yeah, yeah. Now, it's obvious, in these 20, 30 minutes we've been on that you are very knowledgeable about what it is that you do and the experiences that you've had in the course of your business career. And I'm confident we could go hours and hours teaching about some of the things that are going on. And, we definitely appreciate that. But we do also want the entrepreneur audience to understand you want to be knowledgeable in your business because that's a key point that I want everybody to pay attention
Right.
to that's watching today. You got to know your stuff because if you don't know your stuff, how can you sell it?
You need to be able to, something I've learned, and you hear marketers talk about it all the time, the USP, the unique selling proposition. When you watch business shows, you see Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, and you see Shark Tank, and you see them say the same thing. Um, you got to be able to tell me what you can do with your business in 30 seconds, 60 at the top. And if you can't, if you really don't know what it is you do, then you don't need to be there. And look, it can take years to refine the verbiage to get there. But the other thing from an entrepreneurial standpoint that this is not for the faint of heart. People who come out of a business, they've worked for 20, 30 years at a company and they want to go into, oh, look, I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to go, I'm leaving my corporate law practice and I'm going to make beef jerky, or I've left my corporate world and and they're thinking it's going to be, sunshine and rainbows and easy hours. It's anything but. Whatever you thought you had bad at your corporate gig is going to be worse. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Corporate gigs are great. You get a weekly paycheck or a biweekly paycheck. You own your own business, you can
Yeah.
starve.
Yes.
And
Yes. Yes.
you can be selling assets, to cover bills. And like I said, I think it takes a certain disposition. The other thing is, if you work from home, I know a lot of people were forced to work from home during the virus, during COVID, and they hated it. They couldn't survive. They needed that
Mm-hmm.
office camaraderie. Uh,
Yeah.
didn't bother me. I mean, I've always, for the most part, I've worked from home for a long, long time. But I also think one of the key things that you have to do here, and I think this is a lost art, and you can see it on social media and Twitter or X, whatever it is. People have lost the ability to communicate. Um, People don't know how to talk to one another.
Right.
They become keyboard warriors, and they don't realize that, wait a minute, you you have to understand what you're doing, you have to develop knowledge, and that's the key thing, like you had said, which was, you have to understand it. Well, if you don't understand the market you're going into, there is something called Google. I mean, and you can
Mm-hmm.
look up what it is you're doing. I wasn't there was one other firm when I started this, a firm called Gladson. They started in 1997, 98. I started in 1999, 2000. We were it. That was it. Nobody else existed. And there was no way I couldn't look up UPC data. I mean, I could do a search on UPC data back then. I got no results because it didn't
Right.
exist. Now it's all over. And because of technology, there's tools that I use to, to expand my data and work with it. But still, you need to understand what it is you're doing. You need to understand your who's going to buy from you, who your audience is, how it's going to get used. You need to think outside the box, and I think a lot of people miss that, which is why a lot of these small businesses fail.
Yep.
And so I think the one thing, the expertise, I think it's a slogan I've always lived by. 99% of being smart is knowing what you're dumb at. And I am not a DBA by any stretch of the imagination. I play one on the internet, but I mean,
Hmm.
there's people who will run circles around me with, relational databases. My data is stored in Excel because it can be. I don't create the apps; they do. So I
Right.
think that's one of the key things um, that's there. The other thing too, and I'll pass this along from the background, as you saw in my background, I'm also a magician. I do that for my sanity, literally doing trade shows and team building events and others, just because it's totally different from this. And I want,
Hmm.
you know, if I'm going out and entertaining, or if I'm going out to the cigar lounge, or my wife and I are going out for a dinner party, whatever, I want something different. And I will tell you that the key thing when you are first starting out is value. If
Hmm.
everybody on the street, for sake of argument, is charging, and I don't, whatever business is, let's say it's an hourly business, and the going rate is, for sake of argument, $150 an hour, but you're starving and you need to put food on the table, and you've got a 3 hour gig or 3 hour project, and they say to you, well, we're only going to pay you $50 an hour. Okay. Well, you can be tempted to take it, but the reality is, if you do that, then you've cheapened the market for the rest of us who are charging 150. And so you have to realize that you have innate value. And your innate value may not necessarily be in that business. Your innate value could be, I've worked in the corporate world for 20 years and I've negotiated contracts.
Hmm.
I've developed a particular expertise, maybe not in this field, but in other allied business fields. And that's important. And I think you need to leverage that. Um, which also should tell you, if you've been in the corporate world, what do you see? What do you see as a problem? What do you
Right.
see as something that's not being done? I know a number of attorneys who work for very large corporate law firms, and they've left because there was a market for negotiating contracts, real estate contracts, or whatever it is. But the companies couldn't necessarily, the individuals or small firms couldn't necessarily afford it. Well, when you're working for a large company, your billing rate's what, $1,000 an hour? I mean, plus
Yeah.
all everything else. So you can do it
Hmm.
for $300 an hour, and it's cheaper and it helps them, or retainer agreements or what have you. So I think that's the key thing. I was um, right place, right time, sheer dumb luck, whatever you want to call it, divine inspiration. I got into this database business not knowing a thing about it, not knowing what I was doing. And had it not been for Pepsi Cola, the second phone call I got, and them telling me what to, literally me spending, and of course their offices are just down the street from where I live, them telling me, here's the value of the data, here's what you do with it, here's who you
Hmm.
market it to, here's how we would use it, here's how you get it. We'll help you find it. We'll talk to others. We'll make introductions in grocery stores. So literally, it was everything falling into place at once. That's rare.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Very rare that
Yes.
people fall into something. But if you're going to, if you are thinking about going into something, then do your homework, study it, see if there's a market for it.
Yeah.
I tell everyone who comes to me who's thinking about an idea they have, whatever the idea, crazy as it sounds, get me an NDA, and let's talk. And if nothing else, I will tell you if it's been done, if it's not been done, if it's been done well, if it's been done and everybody failed. So at least I'll give you 25 years of experience, seeing if somebody else tried it, and give you an idea. Well, they failed because, and the number one thing I get is when I put a price and they say, well, I've spent all my development money on the website or on the app or whatever. I burned through family money, etc., and I can't afford data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, get traction, and then when I'm doing well, I'll come back and buy the data. This is
They
how
don't
many.
get to that part.
This is how
Right.
many people who survived.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
If you're creating a data-driven application, I tell everyone, it's like years ago. and I don't know how old you are, but I'm old enough to remember when you bought stereos and they were components. You
Mm-hmm.
bought the equalizer, you bought the turntable, you bought the amplifier, the record player, the cassette player, the speakers. Well, I tell everyone, and most stereo stores will say buy the speakers first because that's what you listen to. And if you like the speakers, you buy all the components that will drive the speakers. If you're creating a data driven application, you get the data first and then you build everything underneath it. Otherwise,
Around it, yeah.
yeah, otherwise you don't. What have you built?
That is true. That is true. I mean, it's one of those. Well, I was born in '78, by the way, but it's
Youngster.
one of those. It's one of those things. Huh? Say it again. Yeah, it's one of those things where, like you mentioned, timing is everything. And if you're in the right place in the right time with the open mindset, you can take advantage of those opportunities
Yeah.
that are there. And for yourself, you seem to have done that in a fabulous fashion. And we do want to talk about your business, but I do want to flip on the other side because you mentioned a couple things that helps you to just have fun. It sound
Yeah.
like, when you said you like to get out and entertain people. So let's just say that Gregg has provided all the data helping people with their efficiencies, and you can just take a few more minutes to yourself. What is it that Gregg would do to try to have a good work-life
Oh,
balance?
I
What would
think
you
one
do?
of the things that my wife and I do every quarter, weather permitting, is we take cruises.
Okay.
We are high level on Royal. We like the Caribbean, east, west, and south. Or let's see, east, west, and south.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're on a ship and you're not near the office. You're away,
Mm-hmm.
and even though I do take my electronic harness, I look at emails just to see if is there anything critical, and if not, I avoid it. I come home, and so I like being on the ship. My wife and I like being away. We have built friendships in pretty much all over the Caribbean, in Mexico and St. Thomas and St. Martin, Aruba, etc. And it's a way of getting away from this. And it's
Mm-hmm.
basically so, depending on the cruise, it's 1,500, 2,500, 3,500, etc. It's a whole lot cheaper than therapy. And
Yes,
it just
yes,
gets
yes.
you out of the office. I happen to be a big sci-fi nut. So at night, if my wife is, working on her crafts or she's reading, I'm watching sci-fi just because
Mm-hmm.
it's mindless. It just gets you
Right,
out
right.
of, it's a de-stressor. Um,
So
I be,
cruises and sci-fi. Now you mentioned one of my favorite movies, The Matrix.
oh
What
yeah.
would you say? What would you say is your favorite sci-fi movie that you could watch right now if we turned it on?
Oh gosh. I would say the remake of Total Recall.
Okay,
The
okay.
one with Colin, whatever it was, the remake,
Mm,
which was based
Farrell.
on a short story called "We Can Remember It for You Wholesale." It was less cheesy than the Arnold Schwarzenegger one, but just because of mind control and what you're
Okay.
doing and all of those kinds of things, I think that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I've always felt that way. Now, really, sci-fi for me is episodic television, Star Trek. I mean, I'm a
Okay.
Trekkie from way back when,
Gotcha.
and I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, living next door to a science fiction writer, Harlan Ellison. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
developed a real appreciation for Ellison's work, which is not for the faint of heart, and for others that are there. But I always thought that sci-fi was one of the really clever ways of addressing morality. And there was an original. It was just on recently, the Star Trek, the original series, where Frank Gorshin and one other writer, and one's half black and half white, the other one's the reverse, and it was
Mm-hmm.
basically it was racism.
Mm-hmm.
It was a way
Mm-hmm.
of being dealt with in a unique way, where you were
Right.
basically being taught about the dangers, but it was in a sci-fi fantasy environment, and therefore you didn't realize you were actually learning as you watched.
Yes, yes. Makes a lot of sense. That is an awesome art and
Yeah.
a skill that they have, that creativity that they wrap it around in. It's a unique thing. I like watching movies as well.
Well, so here's a
And
question. Forget genre in general.
mhm.
If What movie would you watch? I mean, a lot of people have two or three movies. What would you, if the movie came on beginning, middle, and end? What movie would you watch?
It will be all three of the Matrix
Okay. And for me,
series.
it's Silverado.
Okay.
I could
Okay.
watch that. I don't care, beginning, middle, and end. It makes no
Yeah.
difference to me. It's just
Yeah.
it's a great film, um, and so I think one of the things, if I go back to my beginnings, I mean, when I was, back as a teenager and before I got
Mm-hmm.
married, I was watching an old reruns of a TV show called The Magician, with Bill
Okay.
Bixby. I always wanted to be a magician.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I found a mentor. I took classes. I studied. I
Mm-hmm.
became a restaurant magician. I became a working member of the Magic Castle in Hollywood. I've
Mm-hmm.
done trade shows, TV commercials, etc. I've done inset pieces,
Mm.
inset work, and so for me, that was how I got started. For my wife and I mean, there were times when we were either short money, or I had to get a legitimate business because we were going to have kids. We
Mm-hmm.
would have no money. We go out like on Friday or Saturday night, and I'd say, well, let's go to eat. We don't have any money. Well, trust me, we will. And we go into a restaurant on a Friday or Saturday night around 7 or 8 o'clock when the wait was an hour, and I would literally take out a deck of cards and some coins. I would start doing magic, and people were tipping.
Okay.
So in
Okay.
45 minutes, I had dinner paid.
Yes.
And so,
Nice. Nice.
but you can't you can't have an entertainer's lifestyle when you're raising a family. You need to
Yeah, I
get
get it.
into
I
a
understand.
business. And so
Right.
that was what ultimately led to IBM and ultimately led here. But the goal ultimately is, I think like everybody else, sell the business and go back into doing what I love. And what I love is magic. And
Okay.
I would be doing that full time if I could, but when you got kids and grandkids and great grandkids and you're still on the hook for, college loans, or you're the financial backstop.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
quite,
Yes.
we're not quite there yet.
I
But
understand.
you had asked me
Now.
in the beginning, if I had my druthers, what would I do? Quite frankly, I would retire and I would move to St. Thomas.
Yes. Yes.
I have, we have, my wife and I have friends there. We have property there.
Mm-hmm.
We just really like the island. The food is magnificent, and it's a U.S. territory, which means the tax rate is significantly less.
Mm-hmm.
But AT&T, everything is local. So literally, I
Okay.
wouldn't even have to change I wouldn't have to do anything. It's just
Oh.
everything's local, so I can just keep my phone number. Nobody would know
Yes.
where I was.
At any time. Well, that's good. That's good. You can get away to your hideaway, and you will be able to do magic tricks while
Yeah,
you're down there. So that will be awesome. Greg, how can the people that are watching today get in contact with you if they have some more questions about your data and how you
you
can help them?
can call me at
Okay.
469 1961. Once again, 469-585-1961. You can go to one of my websites, glondon.com, my first initial and last name. That's my consulting site. You can go to UPC Data Market, which is where my food .com, upcdatamarket.com, which is my food and beverage. Or you can go to UPC Data for the number 4 spirits.com, UPC Data for spirits.com. And you can download sample data, you can see use cases, you can see other things as well. Or shoot me an email, Gregg, Gregg, at glondon, glondon.com. Again, Gregg, Gregg, at glondon.com.
Yes, we definitely appreciate you sharing all of this fabulous information, even peeling the onion back and letting us know a little bit about those things that you do to help offset all the work that you're doing. And we want to honor you by giving you the last word. So look in the camera and tell us something good, show us something good. What do you got for us, Greg?
This is going to look like CGI, and it's not because we've been doing this, but this is one card. It's a double-sided card. And I'd like to, let's see, put this down a little bit, back up. I'm going to take a bite out of it. Are you
What?
ready?
Yeah, I am
Watch.
ready. Hold on a second now. Did you see that, Branson? That's awesome, man. Listen, you are
It's the card trick I do when I'm on these calls. If
yes,
somebody says, "Hey, can you do something?" It's a whole
right,
lot
right, right.
easier than that. But
Man,
you know,
that's awesome.
I look, to me, quite frankly, the business that you're in, merchant accounts, is that business isn't going away.
Right, 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 right.
And
Yeah, people, it's grown a lot for us. Of course, I'm trying to keep it focused on you, but for us, it's been such a large expansion, especially with COVID happening, and so many people want to have touchless things. We've seen an immense amount of people go from brick and mortar to e-commerce, and we're able to do those integrations, especially with software. As a service, so many businesses are now using those, and we do those integrations. So our business is just continuing to grow,
Right.
and
And
I
that's
can see how
where,
that
and
works.
so you mentioned that, and that's where my data would sit. So if you have for sake of argument, a small liquor store that's got a point of sale system and they want to transition to going online, well, the the data that they need for the point of sale system, the two or three fields like the item name, size, unit of measure, and their price, that's easy. But
Hmm.
if you want to go to an online system where someone is going to search, okay, they're going to search for gin, tequila, whiskey, uh, red wine, white wine. Well, now you've got the categorization built into my data so you can do the drill downs. And
Hmm.
so it's
Hmm.
one set of data to accomplish both things. Um, I think also when you talk about merchant accounts and payment, obviously everybody's concerned with credit card security and those kinds of things, and there are a lot of advances being made in that space. And to
Hmm.
me, I did a little bit of work on yours. You're very secure, and that's very
Yes.
important when people
Yes.
are just going to freely give a credit card.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, Greg, we appreciate you coming on today and sharing so much. Entrepreneurs that are watching today, reach out to this gentleman. As you can see, he is a wealth of knowledge. He is very secure in what it is that he does, and he has so many other skills that he can possibly share. So do yourself a favor and reach out to him. And Greg, we definitely appreciate your time, and thanks for coming on the show today.
My pleasure. Be seeing you.
Awesome. And to the entrepreneurs that are watching, be kind and thanks.
Take care.